Beep, beep, beep. Welcome to Court of the EDI Jester. How you doing? All right. We're going to New Zealand today, which I'm very excited about. In my little diatribe, my repetition of greater writers than I. So we're going to New Zealand and see what's going on over there, which is always fascinating for me. Now, subscribe, share, like, notifications, buy me a coffee, Substack, and come and be a warrior teacher. If you can spread the message, that'd be great. You'll see the adverts going out and about. Ready for January starts. So I met with the new group for the first time yesterday. Some of the new group, some of the new people who are starting. Fantastic, brilliant conversations, and tech tests. There's always tech tests because so many of them are older people. It's like, is this thing on? Which is quite fun. Okay, so I've got something here from Katrina Briggs from the blog A Bold Woman. And it's called We Want Sex in Our Policies to Protect Women's and Girls' Rights, Not Gender, which includes men. So this is in New Zealand. And it's about Christchurch City Council in New Zealand, who put out a draft equity and inclusion policy. There's your warning. Equity. They say the word equity, you need to start going, right, off you go, comrade. Right? Okay, so there was public feedback that was asked for this draft equity and inclusion policy, which there is a link for in the document, which is in the doobries. Okay, so you can have a look. I was delighted, says Bold Woman, to have Di Landy from the Maori Women's Gender Critical Group, Mana, I'm going to try and get this right, folks, Mana Wahine Korero, Sovereign Women Speak, Maha Wahine Korero, what a wonderful language, join forces with me to make an oral submission to the Council about this draft equity and inclusion policy. This particular policy has eschewed using the word sex and uses gender instead. Parasites. Naturally, this leaves it wide open for any man who identifies as a woman to have free and unfettered access to women's and girls' spaces. What could possibly go wrong? Isn't it fascinating? You're seeing these things happen in different time frames and different. It's like it's all going on, but different countries are at different places in what we would call the tram model as warrior teachers, right? In different places. So this is happening here, something else is happening elsewhere. And we're gradually seeing the revealing of a kind of template. Everything's being put in order so we can see how this nastiness works, what happens with these ideas and these dreadful behaviours that we're seeing. I liken it to, years ago, this is so geeky, right? Geekness coming. Years ago, you used to defrag your computer. I don't know if you can still do it now because I've got SSD drives, but you used to defrag your computer, right? And there was this piece of software. You go, do you want to defrag your computer? And you go, yes, please. And then it would start taking all these different coloured blocks that were all mixed up together and it would start putting them in order, right? And I used to watch it like a lunatic. I'd sit there going, trying to guess which one would go next. And eventually, it would all be in bands of the correct colour. That's the end game, isn't it? When everybody knows what it is, when everybody can see which is what, when everybody can decide what's happening. Essentially, we are defragging the West. That's what we're doing, putting it back in its right order. The council hearing panel for oral submissions consisted of 3 councillors. They were very polite, but at least one of them is perceived as likely being hell-bent on pushing this policy through. No matter how good the arguments against it are. Well, we know that this is the zealots, isn't it? Gender-addled grievance gerbil, that's what that is. The meeting was live streamed, but not recorded. However, one of the women who came along to support me, and Di, who made her submission via Zoom, recorded it on her phone. Here is the recording in the link below. The audio is not as clear here as it was on her phone, so I've also copy and pasted the written version of my and Di's submissions underneath. So then you're able to go and have a look and see what Di and Katrina and others have done in terms of their oral submissions. And you can read the oral submission from Di or from Katrina in the blog as well as watch the video. So that's what makes it equally interesting. It's a multimedia presentation here. Right? So I'll give you just a flavour of one of them. Good morning. I do not agree with this overarching equity and inclusion policy and how it will serve as a replacement for the other specifically named policies. The scope is far too broad and generalised to effectively and efficiently manage competing interests and needs between the stated groups of age, gender, disability, ethnicity, culture, faith, geographical location, sexual orientation, and social economic status. It's just a nightmare, isn't it? It's an intersectional nightmare you can't escape from. There are no guardrails in this policy, to prevent who's ever implementing it from drifting off track into favouritism towards one group, nor guidance on how to weigh up conflicting interests and needs. This is very important, that point that was made there by Katrina's oral submission, which she's written for us here as well, is the understanding that we need to be neutral about it all. No group gets elevated in any way. No affinity groups, no happy clappy parties, no posters saying, shake the hand of a pufter or whatever it is they're pushing this week. No, none of that, none of it at all. What should be going on in the background is making sure that people who have a disability are able to take part fully in society. The rest of it goes. All of it. Not a single committee, not a single 50-50 this. The entire edifice must go. We must make sure that when we remove this particularly stinky dandelion, that we take every single piece of root with it. Okay? I know some of you won't be happy about that. Tough. It's all going, right? All of it. The entire boondoggle. Imagine the money we'll save. Bloody hell. And the time. So what it's saying here is that this policy is rather, it's an umbrella policy where disparate groups are all placed into a melting pot underneath it. This is the kind of situation where the already advantaged will be able to take the most advantage, and the loudest and most favoured groups will be able to apply the most pressure to the council to make the policy work in the way they want it to. It has the potential to be extremely time and resource expensive in its management, due to being open to interpretation. Whilst those here today may know exactly what they want from this policy, can it be guaranteed that others will know the same things from reading it, both now and in the future? No is the answer to that. The chances of what we do, what we think is going to happen with something, once you send it out there into the world, doing what we think it's going to do, is practically nil. That's why as little interference in our lives as possible, thank you, the smallest possible government, the smallest possible state, is the only way to go forward after we understand and fully realise the unbelievable toxicity of authoritarianism and totalitarianism and a kind of sick parental coddling that's being carried out by governments across the West. Look at what's happening in Ireland. Although the Council claims adherence to the Bill of Rights Act or the Human Rights Act under the legislation section of this policy, it's unclear whether these acts would take precedence over the equity and inclusion policy in any matters of conflict of interest, or whether the policy would be used instead to override these acts at a local level. Omitting the word sex in the policy may have the effect of stymieing the Council's ability to protect women's and girls' sex-based rights and protection under these acts, as is allowed. I would remind you that gender is not a legally protected characteristic, whereas sex is. The word gender may have been acceptable once when most people considered it to be a polite euphemism for sex, but it now has too many meanings to be clearly understood in policies which govern our lives. And on that last word of wisdom, I think we'll leave it there, but go and have a read. Great piece, and giving us some insight into what's happening in areas in New Zealand, which we, of course, as people in the UK may not consider, but we did Russia yesterday, let's do New Zealand today. Okay, so great to see you. Thank you very much for listening. Ta-da! Keep going, troops!